Marcus Wellington checked his Rolex as the private jet touched down at the executive airport. It was 3:47 p.m., nearly 6 hours earlier than planned. The Tokyo merger had collapsed faster than anyone expected. The other company's CEO had simply signed the papers without the elaborate dinner and negotiations Marcus had prepared for. What should have been a 3-day trip had taken less than 24 hours. He loosened his tie as the car service drove him through the familiar streets of Riverside Heights, the exclusive neighborhood where his Mediterranean-style mansion stood behind iron gates and manicured hedges. Exhaustion pulled at his shoulders, but something else tugged at his chest, a feeling he'd been ignoring for months. Guilt, perhaps, or loneliness. His son Dylan was only 8 years old, and Marcus couldn't remember the last time he'd read him a bedtime story or thrown a football in the backyard. The nanny he'd hired 4 months ago, Elena Rodriguez, had essentially become the boy's primary caregiver. Marcus paid her well, very well, but money couldn't replace a father's presence, and he knew it. The car pulled through the gates, and Marcus grabbed his briefcase, waving off the driver's offer to help with his luggage. He'd get it later. Right now, he just wanted to surprise Dylan, maybe take him out for ice cream, do something normal for once. The house was quiet when he entered through the front door. Too quiet. Usually Mrs. Chen, his elderly cook, would be clattering around in the kitchen at this hour, but the kitchen was empty. He set his briefcase down in the foyer and listened. Then he heard it, laughter. Dylan's laughter, bright and genuine in a way Marcus hadn't heard in months. It was coming from upstairs, from Dylan's room. Marcus climbed the curved staircase, his Italian leather shoes silent on the carpet runner. The laughter grew louder, mixed now with a woman's voice, Elena's voice. But there was something odd about the sound, not inappropriate, but intense, focused. He reached Dylan's door, which stood slightly ajar, and what he saw through the crack made him freeze completely. Elena was kneeling on the floor beside Dylan's bed. But they weren't playing. Spread across the carpet were dozens of pill bottles, medicine boxes, syringes, and medical supplies. Dylan sat cross-legged in his pajamas, his small hands holding what looked like a medical chart. Elena was pointing to something on a tablet screen, speaking in low, urgent tones. Remember, Dylan, if you ever see these symptoms, the pale skin, the excessive thirst, the confusion, you need to act fast. Check the blood sugar first, always first. Can you show me how? Dylan reached for a small device that Marcus recognized with a jolt, a glucose monitor. His son's hands moved with surprising confidence, pretending to prick his finger, reading an imaginary result. 72, Dylan said seriously. That's too low. I need to give 15 grams of fast-acting carbs. Exactly right, Elena said, and there was something fierce in her voice, something almost desperate. And if the person can't swallow? What then? Glucagon injection, Dylan replied, reaching for one of the orange emergency kits Marcus had seen advertised but never really understood. Into the muscle, like you showed me. Marcus pushed the door open. Both of them jumped, Elena scrambling to her feet, her face draining of color. Dylan's eyes went wide. Dad! You're home early. Marcus stood in the doorway, his mind racing through possibilities, each one darker than the last. Was Elena sick? Was she preparing Dylan for something terrible? Was his son in danger? What, he said slowly, his voice colder than he intended, is going on here? Elena's hands twisted together, her usually calm demeanor shattered. She was a petite woman in her late 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and warm brown eyes that now looked terrified. Mr. Wellington, I can explain. I think you'd better. Marcus stepped into the room and he realized his hands were shaking. Why are you teaching my 8-year-old son how to give medical injections? Why is there enough medication here to stock a pharmacy? Dylan stood up, moving protectively closer to Elena. Dad, it's not what you think. Dylan, go to your playroom, now. But Dad, now, Dylan. The command in Marcus's voice was absolute. Dylan looked at Elena, who nodded slightly, and the boy reluctantly left the room, closing the door behind him. Marcus turned back to Elena, and 20 years of boardroom negotiations had taught him to read people. She wasn't just scared. She was devastated, as if her entire world was crumbling. But there was also resignation in her eyes, as if she'd known this moment would come. Sit down, he said, gesturing to Dylan's desk chair. He sat on the edge of the bed, maintaining distance. Talk. Elena sat, but her posture remained rigid. She took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice trembled. I have type 1 diabetes, Mr. Wellington. I've had it since I was 6 years old. Marcus frowned. That didn't explain anything. And 4 days ago, I had a severe hypoglycemic episode while Dylan and I were at the park. She looked down at her hands. I felt it coming, the shakiness, the confusion, but it hit faster than usual. Dylan was on the swings. I barely made it to the bench before everything started spinning. The room seemed to tilt slightly. What happened? I lost consciousness. Elena's voice was barely a whisper now. I don't remember this part, but Dylan told me later. He found me unresponsive on the bench. He tried to wake me up, but I wouldn't respond. He was terrified, but he ran to my purse, found my phone, and called 911. Marcus felt ice spreading through his chest. His son had found his caregiver unconscious in a public park. Anything could have happened. The paramedics arrived within 6 minutes, Elena continued. They gave me glucose, and I woke up in the ambulance. Dylan rode with me to the hospital. He held my hand the whole way. Mr. Wellington, this tiny, brave 8-year-old boy, comforting me while I was the one who was supposed to be taking care of him. Why? Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet. Was I not informed of this immediately? Elena finally looked up, and there were tears in her eyes. Because I knew you'd fire me. Because I knew you'd think I was a liability, a danger to your son. And you'd be right to think that. Then why are you still here? Why didn't you resign? Because Dylan begged me not to. Elena wiped her eyes roughly. When we got home from the hospital that day, he cried, Mr. Wellington. He cried and asked me if I was going to leave like his mother did. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. His ex-wife, Stephanie, had walked out 3 years ago, choosing her modeling career in Paris over raising their son. The divorce had been ugly, and she'd visited Dylan exactly twice since then. Dylan told me he couldn't lose another person he loved, Elena continued, her voice breaking. He said I was his best friend, and I realized that I'd become so much more than just his nanny. I love that boy like he's my own, Mr. Wellington. The thought of leaving him broke my heart. Marcus stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the perfectly manicured backyard where a swing set stood unused. He'd bought that swing set 2 years ago, promising Dylan they'd play on it every weekend. He couldn't remember the last time he'd kept that promise. So instead of leaving, he said slowly, You decided to teach my 8-year-old son how to manage a serious medical condition? Without my permission? Without even telling me? Yes. Elena stood up too, and now there was defiance in her voice alongside the fear. Because the alternative was leaving him completely unprepared. What if it happens again, Mr. Wellington? What if next time we're in the car, or in the house late at night, or somewhere even more remote? Dylan is smart, incredibly smart. If he knows what to look for, if he knows how to help, he could save my life. Or I could simply fire you and hire someone without a life-threatening medical condition. The words came out harsher than Marcus intended, but he was angry now, angry at the situation, at being kept in the dark, at the fact that his son had experienced trauma that Marcus knew nothing about. Elena's shoulders slumped. Yes, you could do that. You probably should do that. But before you do, I need you to understand something. She walked over to Dylan's desk and picked up a notebook, handing it to Marcus. This is what Dylan wrote the day after the park incident. Marcus opened the notebook with reluctant hands. The page was filled with his son's careful, rounded handwriting. Today, Elena got sick at the park, and I was really scared. The ambulance came and they helped her, but I didn't know what to do. I want to learn how to help her if it happens again because she always helps me with everything. She helps me with homework and plays games with me and listens when I talk about missing Mom. She doesn't check her phone when I'm talking like Dad does. She's there. I don't want her to go away. I want to keep her safe like she keeps me safe. Marcus's hands tightened on the notebook. His son had written that he checked his phone when Dylan was talking. Had he been that absent? That disconnected? He looked up at Elena, who was watching him with a mix of fear and compassion. For the past 4 days, she said quietly, Dylan and I have been studying diabetes management together. He's been learning the warning signs, how to check blood sugar, what to do in different scenarios. He's been taking it so seriously, Mr. Wellington. He takes notes. He asks questions. He wants to be prepared. He's 8 years old, Marcus said, but the anger was draining from his voice, replaced by something more complex. He shouldn't have to worry about keeping adults safe. You're right. He shouldn't. Elena met his eyes directly. But he loves me, and people who love each other take care of each other. That's what I've been trying to teach him. Not just medical procedures, but responsibility, compassion, what it means to show up for someone even when it's hard. Marcus sank back down onto the bed, suddenly exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the flight from Tokyo. You should have told me. Yes, I should have. I was wrong to keep it from you. But Mr. Wellington, I need you to understand, I'm not fragile. I manage my condition carefully. I check my blood sugar multiple times a day. I wear a continuous glucose monitor. I carry emergency supplies everywhere. That episode at the park was the first time in 3 years that I've lost consciousness. It was a perfect storm of factors. I'd skipped lunch because Dylan wanted to go to the park right away, and I'd exercised more than usual. That's not reassuring, Marcus said flatly. I know. But let me ask you something. Elena's voice took on a different tone, almost challenging. In the 4 months I've been here, has Dylan been happy? Marcus thought about the laughter he'd heard when he came up the stairs. Genuine, uninhibited joy. He thought about how Dylan always asked when Elena would be back on her days off. He thought about the school reports he'd been too busy to read carefully. How Dylan's teacher had mentioned in the last parent conference that Dylan seemed more confident, more engaged. Yes, he admitted quietly. He has been. Has he been safe? Fed well, driven carefully, supervised properly. Yes. Has he been loved? Marcus looked up sharply, and Elena's eyes were bright with unshed tears again. Because I do love him, Mr. Wellington. I know I'm just the hired help, just the nanny who can be replaced with a phone call. But that little boy has become the most important person in my world. I would never do anything to put him at risk. If I thought my condition made me unfit to care for him, I would have left already. No matter how much it hurt. There was a soft knock at the door, and then Dylan's voice, small and worried. Can I come back in? Marcus and Elena looked at each other. Yes, Marcus called out. Come in, buddy. Dylan entered slowly, his eyes red-rimmed. He'd been crying. He looked at Elena first, checking that she was okay, and then at his father. Are you going to fire Elena? The direct question hung in the air. Marcus looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw things he'd been too busy to notice. Dylan had grown taller in recent months. His face had lost some of its baby roundness. But more than physical changes, there was something different in his bearing, a maturity that seemed too old for 8. Come here, Dylan, Marcus said, patting the bed beside him. Dylan came over and sat down, and Marcus put an arm around his son's shoulders. I need you to tell me the truth about something. Are you scared? Living with the knowledge that Elena might have another medical emergency? Dylan thought about this seriously, the way he seemed to think about everything. A little bit, he admitted. But I'm more scared of her leaving. And Dad, I'm not scared like I was before. Before, I didn't know what was happening or what to do. Now I know. Elena taught me, and knowing makes me feel better, not worse. What if you panic? What if you can't remember what to do? Elena says that's why we practice. She says in an emergency, your training takes over if you practice enough. Like how you always know what to say in business meetings because you've done it so many times. Marcus felt a strange tightness in his throat. When had he last had such a substantive conversation with his son? You're very brave, Dylan. Elena's brave too, Dylan said loyally. She has to prick her finger to check her blood like 8 times a day. And she never complains. She says diabetes is just part of her life, not her whole life. Marcus looked at Elena over Dylan's head. She was standing by the window now, giving them space, but watching with barely contained emotion. Elena, Marcus said, please sit down. We need to discuss this properly. She returned to the desk chair, sitting on the edge as if ready to flee. Marcus took a deep breath. 20 years of making difficult decisions had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now, his instincts were telling him something surprising. I'm angry, he said directly. I'm angry that you didn't tell me about the park incident immediately. I'm angry that you made significant decisions about my son's education and activities without consulting me. As your employer, I have a right to be angry about that. Elena nodded, her face pale. I understand. But, Marcus continued, and Dylan's arm tensed hopefully under his. I'm also seeing something I should have seen months ago. My son is thriving. He's happy, engaged, learning important life skills. The medical training you've been giving him, yes, it's unusual. but it's also teaching him responsibility, empathy, and crisis management. Those are valuable skills. Does that mean? Dylan started, then stopped, afraid to finish the sentence. Marcus looked at his son. Elena isn't going anywhere if she still wants to stay after I've been such a difficult employer. Elena's hand flew to her mouth, and tears spilled down her cheeks. Mr. Wellington, but, Marcus said firmly, things are going to change. First, Elena, you're getting a raise effective immediately, 20%. I've been underpaying you for what you actually do here. Mr. Wellington, that's not necessary. It absolutely is. Second, I need you to provide me with complete medical documentation about your condition, emergency protocols, and the contact information for your doctor. Not because I don't trust you, but because if an emergency happens, I need to be fully informed. Elena nodded quickly. Of course. I should have provided that from the beginning. Third, Marcus continued, turning to Dylan. I'm going to learn everything you're learning. If you're going to be trained in diabetes management, so am I. We're both going to know how to help Elena if she needs it. Dylan's face lit up. Really, Dad? Really? Elena, can you teach us together? Elena wiped her eyes, smiling through tears. I would be honored. And fourth, Marcus said, and his voice softened. I'm going to be home more. A lot more. I've been a terrible father, Dylan. I've let work consume me, and I've used money as a substitute for presence. That ends now. Dylan hugged him suddenly, fiercely. You're not a terrible dad. You're just busy. Busy is an excuse, not a reason, Marcus said, hugging his son back and meeting Elena's eyes over the boy's head. I've been hiding from being a real parent because it's scary, and I don't always know what to do. But you know what? I run a company with 3,000 employees. I negotiate multi-million-dollar deals. I can figure out how to be present for my own son. Elena stood up, smoothing her hands on her jeans. Mr. Wellington, I should let you two have time together. I'll go start dinner. Elena, wait, Marcus said. There's one more thing. Stop calling me Mr. Wellington. We're not employer and employee anymore. Not really. We're co-parents, I suppose. Call me Marcus. She smiled, still tentative but genuine. I'm not sure I can do that. Try, and Elena? Thank you. Thank you for loving my son when I was too absent to do it properly. Thank you for teaching him things I never thought to teach him. Thank you for showing him what real dedication and courage look like. Elena's voice was thick with emotion. He's an extraordinary child. It's easy to love him? Yeah, Marcus said, ruffling Dylan's hair. He really is. Over the next few weeks, Marcus's life transformed in ways he hadn't anticipated. He started leaving the office at 5:30 p.m., shocking his executive assistant. He turned down the Tokyo follow-up trip and sent his VP instead. He cleared his Saturdays completely, and every evening at 7 p.m., he and Dylan sat with Elena in the living room for what they'd started calling Diabetes University. Elena was a patient, thorough teacher, and Marcus found himself fascinated by the complexity of managing the condition. He learned about insulin to carbohydrate ratios, the difference between basal and bolus insulin, how stress and exercise and even the weather could affect blood sugar levels. Dylan took it all seriously, taking notes in his careful handwriting, asking questions that were often surprisingly insightful. If Elena's blood sugar is high after lunch, why can't we just give her more insulin right away? He asked one evening. Good question, Elena said, pulling up a chart on her tablet. See this insulin curve? When I take fast-acting insulin, it stays active in my body for about 4 hours. If I take another dose too soon, the insulin can stack, which means too much insulin at once, Dylan finished, his face scrunching in concentration. Which makes the blood sugar crash too low. Exactly. So I have to wait and be patient, which is sometimes the hardest part. Marcus found himself admiring Elena's matter-of-fact attitude toward her condition. She never seemed bitter or self-pitying, just pragmatic. She wore her continuous glucose monitor with the same casualness that he wore his watch, checking her phone app periodically to see her blood sugar trend. Doesn't it bother you? He asked one evening after Dylan had gone to bed, while he and Elena were cleaning up the dinner dishes together. Having to think about it constantly? Elena considered this while drying a plate. Sometimes, she admitted. Especially when I was younger and wanted to be like everyone else. But Mr. Marcus, she corrected herself with a small smile. I learned that health isn't about being perfect or problem-free. It's about managing what you have with grace and intelligence. Diabetes made me disciplined, attentive to my body, good in emergencies. Those aren't bad traits to have. No, Marcus agreed. They're not. He was also spending real time with Dylan. Not expensive outings to theme parks or toy stores, but simple present moments. They threw the football in the backyard. They built Lego castles sprawled across the living room floor. They cooked breakfast together on Saturday mornings, making pancakes that were sometimes burnt but always eaten with enthusiasm. One evening, Marcus came home at 6:15 p.m. to find Elena and Dylan in the kitchen making dinner together. They were laughing about something. Flour somehow scattered across the counter, and neither of them heard him come in. He stood in the doorway, watching them, and felt a profound sense of rightness. This was what a home should feel like: warm, lived in, full of genuine connection. Then Elena's phone alarm went off. She glanced at it, frowned slightly, and pulled out her glucose monitor. 68, she read. I need a snack. Dylan immediately opened the cupboard where they kept emergency supplies. Apple juice or glucose tablets? Juice is faster. Thanks, Dylan. Dylan poured her a small glass of apple juice, measuring it carefully. 4 ounces, that's 15 grams of carbs. Perfect. Elena drank it in quick gulps, then set a timer on her phone. 15 minutes, then I'll recheck. Marcus watched this exchange with a mixture of pride and concern. Dylan was so competent, so calm, but something nagged at Marcus. Elena, how often does this happen? Lowe's depends on the day. Maybe once or twice a week, usually because I've miscalculated something or been more active than planned. And if Dylan and I weren't here? If you were alone? I'd handle it, like I've been handling it for 20+ years. But she said it gently, understanding his concern. Marcus, I've lived alone, traveled alone, managed alone. Having you and Dylan trained isn't about me being dependent. It's about being smart and building a support system. When Elena's timer went off, she checked again. 84, perfect, back in range. Crisis averted, Dylan said cheerfully, returning to stirring whatever was in the pot on the stove. But 2 weeks later, there was a real crisis. It happened at 2:33 a.m. on a Tuesday night. Marcus woke to someone pounding on his bedroom door, not knocking, pounding desperately. He threw off the covers and yanked open the door to find Dylan in his pajamas, his face pale in the hallway light, his hands shaking. Dad, it's Elena. I can't wake her up. Marcus's blood turned to ice. Show me. They ran to Elena's room, a converted guest suite on the second floor. Elena was in bed, her eyes closed, her skin pale and covered in sweat. Marcus could see her chest moving, so she was breathing. But when he shook her shoulder and called her name, she didn't respond at all. Dylan. Call 911, Marcus ordered, but Dylan was already ahead of him, pulling out his phone with trembling but determined hands. Wait, Dylan said, his voice high with stress but focused. Check her glucose first. That's the protocol. She might just need sugar. Marcus grabbed Elena's glucose monitor from her nightstand where she always kept it. His hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. How do I... Prick her finger. Put the blood on the test strip. Dylan was talking to the 911 operator now, his voice remarkably steady. Yes, she's breathing. She's 28 years old. She has type 1 diabetes. We're checking her blood sugar now. The number that appeared on the monitor made Marcus's stomach drop. 41. That's way too low. Dylan covered the phone. Dad, get the orange emergency kit from her dresser drawer. The glucagon kit, hurry! Marcus found it, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. He'd practiced this a dozen times, but practice wasn't the same as real life. Not when someone he cared about. And when had that happened? When had Elena become someone he cared about deeply? Was unconscious in front of him. I can't. Dylan, I don't think I can. Dylan thrust the phone at him. Talk to them. I'll do it. And then Marcus watched, amazed and terrified, as his 8-year-old son opened the emergency kit with steady hands, read the directions on the side even though he'd memorized them, and prepared the glucagon injection exactly as Elena had taught him. This is going to help you. Elena, Dylan said softly, more to himself than to her. This is going to make you better. He found the injection site on Elena's arm, swabbed it with alcohol, and administered the injection with more confidence than Marcus could have managed. What do we do now? Marcus asked the 911 operator, his voice cracking. The paramedics are 3 minutes away, the operator said calmly. Turn her on her side in case she vomits. The glucagon should take effect in 5 to 15 minutes. You did the right thing. Marcus and Dylan carefully positioned Elena on her side. Dylan pulled a blanket up over her, then took her hand, his small fingers wrapping around hers. "You're going to be okay," Dylan whispered. "You have to be okay." They waited. It was the longest 3 minutes of Marcus's life. He kept his hand on Elena's shoulder, feeling her breathing, watching for any sign of change. Then, about 4 minutes after the injection, Elena moaned softly. Her eyelids fluttered. "Elena?" Marcus leaned closer. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes opened, unfocused and confused. What happened?" "Your blood sugar crashed," Dylan said, his voice shaking now with relief. "We gave you glucagon." Elena's face crumpled with a mix of emotions, embarrassment, gratitude, concern. "Dylan, I'm so sorry." "I'm so sorry you had to—" "Don't," Dylan said fiercely. "Don't apologize. I'm just glad I knew what to do." The paramedics arrived and took over, checking Elena's vitals, starting an IV, asking questions. Her blood sugar was already rising from the glucagon, climbing back toward safe levels. They recommended a trip to the hospital for observation, and Elena was too weak to argue. "Can I ride with her?" Dylan asked, looking up at Marcus with those eyes that had seen too much for 8 years old. Marcus looked at the senior paramedic, who shook his head slightly. "Family only in the ambulance, but you can follow us to the hospital." "I'm family," Dylan said with such conviction that everyone stopped. She's my family." The paramedic looked at Marcus, who nodded. "He's right. We're both going." They let Dylan ride in the back of the ambulance while Marcus followed in his car. At the hospital, they waited together in a private room while Elena was fully evaluated. She was monitored for 2 hours, her blood sugar stabilized, and the doctor on call discussed what might have gone wrong. "My insulin pump malfunctioned," Elena explained, looking exhausted and chagrined. "It must have delivered too much basal insulin overnight without alarming. I didn't wake up when I started going low because it happened gradually in my sleep. If Dylan hadn't found me—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The doctor turned to Dylan with obvious respect. "Young man, you saved this woman's life tonight. You should be very proud of yourself." Dylan just nodded, but he didn't let go of Elena's hand. "I'm terrified," Marcus admitted. "I'm terrified something worse could happen. I'm terrified of how much my son loves you and how devastated he'd be if he lost you. But I'm also grateful. You've taught Dylan what real courage looks like. You've taught him competence and compassion. And you've taught me—" He paused, surprised by the emotion in his own voice. "You've taught me that showing up is more important than being perfect." They sat in comfortable silence as the sunrise painted the room gold. Finally, Elena spoke. "My insulin pump needs to be replaced. I've already called my endocrinologist, and I'm going to set multiple alarms on my phone and continuous glucose monitor to alert me if I'm trending low overnight. I'll be more careful, Marcus. I promise. I know you will. And Dylan and I will be here, just in case." "Just in case," she echoed softly. The next weeks brought changes, but they also brought a deepening sense of family that Marcus had never experienced before. He moved his home office to a room on the 2nd floor so he could work from home more often. He learned to recognize the subtle signs that Elena's blood sugar was dropping, the slight tremor in her hands, the way her speech would become a bit imprecise. Dylan went back to being a normal 8-year-old, playing video games and complaining about homework, but there was a new maturity in him, a quiet confidence that Marcus treasured. One Saturday afternoon, 3 months after the night of the emergency, Marcus found Elena and Dylan in the kitchen making cookies. Flour was everywhere again. They never seemed to bake without creating a disaster area, but the laughter was genuine and easy. "Dad, want to help?" Dylan called out. "Sure." Marcus rolled up his sleeves and joined them at the counter. "What can I do?" "You can crack the eggs," Elena said, handing him 2 eggs. "But gently. Dylan and I have a bet going on whether you'll get shells in the bowl." "I'm not going to get shells in the bowl. I run a multi-million-dollar company." "Different skill set," Elena said with a grin, and Dylan giggled. Marcus cracked the first egg perfectly. The second one, he deliberately fumbled, getting a small piece of shell in the bowl. "Oops, Dad, you did that on purpose," Dylan accused, but he was laughing. As they worked together, mixing and measuring and taste-testing chocolate chips, Marcus realized something profound. This wasn't a perfect family. Elena still had medical emergencies sometimes, minor ones now, caught early and managed quickly. Dylan still missed his mother occasionally, though he talked about it more openly now. Marcus still sometimes worked late, though never as late as before, but they were real. They showed up for each other. They learned and adapted and forgave and tried again. That evening, after dinner, after cookies, after Dylan was tucked into bed, Marcus found Elena on the back patio, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Can I join you?" he asked. Of course. He sat beside her on the patio swing, setting it into gentle motion. They swung in silence for a while, comfortable in each other's presence. "Elena," Marcus said finally, "I need to tell you something." She turned to look at him. "Curious but calm. When I hired you 4 months ago, I was looking for an employee. Someone competent to take care of Dylan while I focused on work. Someone who would be professional and reliable and forgettable." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But you've become so much more than that. You've become essential. Not just to Dylan, but to me. You've taught me how to be present, how to prioritize what matters, how to show up even when it's inconvenient. You've made our house a home." Elena's eyes were bright. "Marcus, I'm not saying this to make you uncomfortable. I'm saying it because it's true, and because I want you to know that you're not just the nanny. You're family. You're part of us, and I hope you'll stay for a long time. Not because I'm paying you, but because this is where you belong." Elena was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "I came here needing a job. I stayed because I fell in love with Dylan, but somewhere along the way, this became my home too. You and Dylan, you're my family in a way I never expected to find." Marcus took her hand, and they swung together in the gathering darkness, not needing to say anything more. Inside, Dylan was supposed to be sleeping, but he'd crept to his window to check on the stars. He saw his father and Elena on the patio swing, holding hands, talking quietly, and he smiled. He'd learned a lot in the past few months, about diabetes and emergencies and responsibility. But the most important thing he'd learned was this: families weren't perfect, and they didn't always look like other people's families, but they were real and strong and worth fighting for. He climbed back into bed, pulled his covers up, and fell asleep with a smile on his face, knowing that when he woke up in the morning, the people he loved would still be there, imperfect and real, and his. The Millionaire CEO had come home early that day to find his housekeeper teaching his son how to save her life. What had seemed like a crisis had actually been the beginning of something unexpected and beautiful, a family built not on perfection, but on presence, courage, and unconditional love. 6 months later, Marcus sat in his office on the 14th floor of Wellington Enterprises, staring at a contract that should have excited him. A partnership with a Dubai-based conglomerate, worth $40 million over 3 years. It would require extensive travel, 2 weeks in Dubai next month, then quarterly trips for the foreseeable future. A year ago, he would have signed without hesitation. Now, his pen hovered over the signature line, and all he could think about was Dylan's upcoming school play. Dylan had the lead role, the Scarecrow in a production of The Wizard of Oz. He'd been practicing his lines for weeks, often with Elena running lines with him at the kitchen table while they did homework together. Marcus had promised he'd be there. Front row, opening night, which happened to be the same week as the proposed Dubai trip. He set down his pen and buzzed his assistant. "Sarah, can you come in here?" Sarah entered with her ever-present tablet, ready to take notes. She'd been with Marcus for 12 years and knew his moods better than anyone in the company. "The Dubai contract," Marcus said. "I need you to propose a modification. I'll do the initial negotiation via video conference, and I'll send James for the on-site meetings. I'm not traveling internationally for the next year except in genuine emergencies." Sarah's eyebrows rose slightly. "Mr. Wellington, they specifically requested you for all major meetings. They might not accept that modification. Then we'll walk away from the deal." Now Sarah looked genuinely shocked. "Sir, this is a $40 million contract. I know exactly what it's worth, Sarah, but I also know what I'd be giving up to sign it, and that's worth more." He smiled at her confused expression. "My son has a school play next Thursday at 7 p.m. I promised I'd be there, and I'm going to be there." Some promises matter more than money. Sarah studied him for a moment, then smiled, a genuine warm smile he'd rarely seen from his usually professional assistant. "I'll draft the modification and send it over today. And Mr. Wellington, good for you." That evening, Marcus arrived home at 5:45 p.m. to find controlled chaos in the living room. Dylan was in full Scarecrow costume, burlap shirt, painted face, straw sticking out from his sleeves, while Elena knelt beside him with a needle and thread. Making adjustments. Stand still, Dylan. Or I'm going to poke you, Elena said, her mouth full of pins. I am standing still. It's not my fault the costume is itchy. The costume is itchy because you're made of straw, and that's what your character is supposed to feel like. Method acting. Dylan giggled, then caught sight of Marcus in the doorway. Dad, you're home early again. Couldn't miss costume fitting, Marcus said, setting down his briefcase. Looking good, buddy. Very scarecrow-like. Elena made the whole costume from scratch, Dylan said proudly. She's been working on it for 3 weeks. Marcus looked at Elena with new appreciation. She was wearing old jeans and a t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, a measuring tape around her neck. She looked tired but happy, fully engaged in the task at hand. You didn't have to do that, Marcus said. I could have just bought one online. Elena looked up, pins still in her mouth, and shook her head. She removed the pins carefully before speaking. Store-bought costumes are generic. Dylan deserves something special for his first lead role. Besides, she added with a grin, I like making things. My mother was a seamstress. She taught me before she passed away. It was the first time Elena had mentioned her mother, and Marcus realized how little he still knew about her life before she came to work for them. I didn't know that. I'd love to hear more about her sometime. I'd like that, Elena said softly, then turned back to Dylan. Okay, arms up one more time. I need to check the length. As Marcus watched them work together, his phone buzzed with an email from Sarah. The Dubai company had accepted the modification. James would handle the on-site meetings and Marcus would oversee via video conference. The deal was moving forward and he wouldn't miss Dylan's play. He smiled and silenced his phone, tucking it into his pocket. There would always be another email, another deal, another crisis at work, but there would never be another first lead role, another chance to keep this specific promise to his son. The night of the school play arrived with surprising speed. Marcus left work at 4 p.m., unheard of on a Thursday, and stopped to pick up flowers. He got 3 bouquets, one for Dylan, one for Dylan's teacher who had directed the play, and one for Elena, who had not only made the costume but had helped Dylan rehearse every single night. At the school auditorium, Marcus found seats in the front row, saving spaces for Elena and himself. She arrived 15 minutes before curtain, slightly out of breath, wearing a blue dress that Marcus had never seen before. She looked beautiful. Sorry, she said, sliding into the seat beside him. I had to help with last-minute costume adjustments backstage. 3 kids had wardrobe malfunctions. Of course you did, Marcus said warmly. Here, these are for you. He handed her one of the bouquets, and Elena's face went pink with surprise. Marcus, you didn't have to. I wanted to. You've put as much work into this play as Dylan has, maybe more. Elena buried her face in the flowers, clearly touched. Thank you. That's really thoughtful. The lights dimmed, and the play began. Marcus had sat through dozens of board presentations, hundreds of business pitches, but nothing had ever captured his attention quite like watching his son on that stage. Dylan was good, surprisingly good. He delivered his lines with perfect timing, moved with the gawky uncertainty appropriate to a character with no brain, and when he sang, "If I Only Had a Brain," his voice rang clear and true through the auditorium. Marcus felt Elena grab his hand during Dylan's big emotional scene near the end. When the scarecrow realizes he's had intelligence all along, her fingers tightened around his, and when Marcus glanced over, he saw tears streaming down her face. He's so talented, she whispered. I'm so proud of him. Me too, Marcus whispered back, and realized he was close to tears himself. When the play ended and the cast took their bows, Dylan searched the audience until he found them, and his face lit up with pure joy. Marcus and Elena stood, applauding until their hands hurt, and Marcus held up the bouquet so Dylan could see it. Backstage afterward, they found Dylan surrounded by classmates and parents, still in costume, glowing with excitement. When he saw Marcus and Elena, he pushed through the crowd and hugged them both simultaneously. You came! You both came. Of course we came, Marcus said, kneeling down to Dylan's level. I promised, didn't I? You were incredible, buddy. A natural performer. You really were, Elena added, handing him his flowers. I cried during your big scene. You made me believe you really were the scarecrow. Dylan beamed, then looked between them with an expression that seemed older than his 8 years. Can we go celebrate? Just the three of us? Absolutely, Marcus said. Where do you want to go? Can we go home and have pizza and watch a movie? I don't want to go somewhere fancy. I just want to be with you guys. Marcus felt that tightness in his throat again. Home pizza sounds perfect. They ordered pizza on the way home, changed into comfortable clothes, and settled in the living room with the food spread across the coffee table. Dylan picked an animated movie about superheroes, but Marcus found himself watching his son and Elena more than the screen. They sat on the couch together. Dylan in the middle, Elena's arm around his shoulders, Dylan's head resting against Marcus's side. It was simple and ordinary and absolutely perfect. Halfway through the movie, Dylan's phone buzzed. He looked at it and his expression changed, excitement mixed with nervousness. It's Mom. She's video calling. Marcus's jaw tightened automatically. Stephanie rarely called, and when she did, it was usually to make promises she wouldn't keep. But he forced his voice to stay neutral. You can answer it in the kitchen if you want privacy. Dylan nodded and headed to the kitchen, phone in hand. Through the doorway, Marcus could hear his side of the conversation. Hi, Mom. Yeah, I'm good. I was in a play tonight. I was the lead. Yeah, the Scarecrow. It was really fun. Dad came and Elena made my costume, and I didn't forget any of my lines. A pause. Elena's my nanny, but she's more like, she's family. She lives with us, and she's teaching Dad and me about diabetes and... Another pause, longer this time. Oh, okay. Yeah, I understand. Maybe at Christmas then? Okay. Love you too. Bye. Dylan came back to the living room, and Marcus could see he was trying not to cry. Elena immediately opened her arms, and Dylan went to her, burying his face in her shoulder. She's not coming for my birthday next month, Dylan said, his voice muffled. She said she has a fashion show in Milan. Marcus felt rage surge through him. Not the cold, controlled anger he used in business, but hot, protective fury. How dare Stephanie keep disappointing their son? How dare she prioritize her career over a phone call with the child she'd abandoned? But before he could say anything, Elena was speaking softly to Dylan, her hand stroking his hair. I know it hurts, sweetie. I know you wish she could be here more. But you know what I've learned? Sometimes the people who are supposed to love us aren't able to show up the way we need them to. And that's not your fault. That's about their limitations, not about your worth. But she's my mom, Dylan said. And the pain in his voice broke Marcus's heart. I know, and I can't replace her, and I wouldn't try to. But Dylan, look around. Look at who is here. Your dad left work early today. I left at 4 p.m., Marcus interjected. My assistant nearly fainted. Dylan gave a watery laugh. He bought flowers for you and for me, Elena continued. He sat in the front row and cheered louder than anyone. He came home and ordered your favorite pizza and watched your favorite movie, even though he's probably exhausted from work. That's what showing up looks like. That's what real love looks like. Not perfect, but present. Dylan lifted his head from Elena's shoulder and looked at Marcus. Thanks for coming tonight, Dad. It really mattered. I wouldn't have missed it for anything in the world, Marcus said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. Dylan, I can't control what your mother does or doesn't do, but I can control what I do. And I promise you, I'm going to be here. For your plays, your soccer games, your parent-teacher conferences, your good days and bad days. I'm here. Dylan nodded, wiping his eyes. Then he said something that Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. I used to wish Mom would come back, but now I think maybe our family is better the way it is, with you and Elena and me. Is that bad? No, Marcus said firmly. That's not bad at all. That's honest. Family isn't always about blood, buddy. It's about who shows up. It's about who stays. Dylan looked at Elena. You're going to stay, right? You're not going to leave like Mom did. Elena's eyes filled with tears again. Dylan, I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me, medical emergencies and all. Good, Dylan said simply, and settled back between them to finish the movie. Later, after Dylan had fallen asleep on the couch and Marcus had carried him to bed, Marcus and Elena found themselves alone in the kitchen, cleaning up the pizza boxes and leftover plates. You were good with him tonight, Marcus said, loading the dishwasher. What you said about showing up, about real love, that was exactly what he needed to hear. Elena rinsed a glass in the sink. I meant every word. Marcus, I hope you know that you've become a completely different father than the man who hired me 6 months ago. Dylan sees it. I see it. You should be proud of yourself. I had good teachers, Marcus said. Both of you. They worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, and then Elena's continuous glucose monitor alarm went off. She checked her phone and frowned. 72. I need a snack before bed. I'll get it, Marcus said, already reaching for the cabinet where they kept emergency supplies. He'd learned exactly where everything was, learned to read Elena's moods and recognize the subtle signs of highs and lows. He handed her a small box of crackers with peanut butter. Thank you, she said, and there was something in her voice that made Marcus look up from the dishwasher. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Tender, hesitant, hopeful. Elena, he said slowly. Can I ask you something? Of course. Are you happy here? Not just professionally satisfied, but actually happy? Elena set down the crackers. Marcus, I'm happier than I've been in years. This house, you and Dylan, you've given me something I didn't even know I was missing. A real home, a real family. Good, Marcus said, because I've been thinking. Your title is still officially nanny, but that hasn't been accurate for months. You're not staff. You're not an employee. You're... He paused, searching for the right words. I'm what? Elena asked softly. Marcus set down the dish towel and turned to face her fully. You're the person who makes this house run. You're the person Dylan runs to when he's hurt or excited or confused. You're the person who taught me how to be a better father. You're the person I look for when I come home at the end of the day. You're essential, Elena. Not to the household logistics, but to us. To me, Elena's breath caught. Marcus, what are you saying? I'm saying that somewhere between the diabetes training and the school plays and the late-night talks, I fell in love with you. The words came out more easily than Marcus had expected. I'm in love with your competence and your courage. I'm in love with how you love my son. I'm in love with your terrible baking disasters and the way you check your blood sugar with the same casualness that most people check the time. I'm in love with you, Elena, and I needed you to know. Elena stood very still, her eyes wide. You're in love with me. Yes, and I know this complicates everything. I know I'm your employer technically, and there's a power dynamic to consider. I'm not expecting you to feel the same way. I just needed to be honest because... Elena closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was gentle and tentative and perfect. Her hands coming up to frame his face, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her closer. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena was smiling through tears. I'm in love with you too, you impossible man. I've been in love with you for months, but I didn't think you could ever see me as anything other than the help. The help? Marcus laughed, incredulous. Elena, you're the most important person in my life besides Dylan. You're my partner in every way that matters. Then we should probably discuss logistics, Elena said, always practical. Because I don't want to be your employee anymore if we're going to be... What are we going to be? Together, Marcus said simply. We're going to be together. As for logistics, we'll figure it out. Maybe you become Dylan's full-time guardian when I'm traveling, officially a co-parent. Maybe we draw up new contracts that reflect your actual role in this family. Maybe, he paused, suddenly nervous. Maybe eventually we make this even more official. Are you talking about marriage? Elena asked, her eyes sparkling. Marcus Wellington, are you proposing to me in your kitchen at 11:37 p.m. while I'm eating emergency crackers? No, Marcus said firmly. When I propose to you, and I will propose to you, Elena Rodriguez, it's going to be romantic and memorable and planned. This is just me stating my intentions. I want a future with you. I want to wake up every morning knowing you're here. I want to navigate all of life's complications together. Your diabetes, Dylan's needs, work challenges, everything. I want us to be a real family, legally and officially. Elena wiped her eyes again, laughing and crying simultaneously. You're serious, completely serious. But I also want to do this right, at a pace that feels comfortable for you. We can take our time. We can tell Dylan when we're ready. We can... Tell me what? A sleepy voice asked from the doorway. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers. Dylan stood in the kitchen doorway in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. I woke up and you weren't in your room, Dad. What's going on? Marcus and Elena looked at each other, and Marcus saw his own uncertainty reflected in her eyes. But then Dylan tilted his head, looking between them with surprising shrewdness for an 8-year-old who'd just woken up. Were you guys kissing? He asked. There was a moment of frozen silence. Then Marcus decided that they'd already committed to honesty as a family value. Yes, we were. Finally, Dylan said and yawned. I've been waiting forever for you two to figure it out. Can I go back to bed now? Elena burst out laughing. Wait, what? You knew? Of course I knew. Dad looks at you the way princes look at princesses in my books. And you look at him the same way. Plus, you guys are always finding excuses to be in the same room together. It was pretty obvious. Marcus shook his head, amazed. How long have you thought this? Since like 3 months ago. When Dad started coming home early and you both started smiling all the time. Dylan walked over and hugged them both. I think it's great. Does this mean Elena's going to be my stepmom? Would that be okay with you? Elena asked carefully. I know I can't replace your mother. You're not replacing her, Dylan interrupted with startling maturity. You're just being who you already are. You're already kind of my mom anyway, just without the official title. So yeah, it's more than okay. It's perfect. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. When did you get so wise, buddy? I learned from the best, Dylan said, grinning up at Elena. Now can I please go back to bed? Tomorrow's Friday and we have library day at school. Go, Marcus said, laughing. We'll talk more in the morning. Dylan headed back toward the stairs, then turned back. Hey, Dad, Elena? I'm really happy. Just so you know, this is what I wished for when I blew out my birthday candles last year. After Dylan had disappeared upstairs, Marcus pulled Elena back into his arms. Well, that went better than expected. He's an amazing kid, Elena said, her head resting on Marcus's chest. We're very lucky. Yes, we are. Marcus kissed the top of her head. So what now? Now, Elena said, pulling back to look at him. We take this one day at a time. We figure out the logistics. We tell Mrs. Chen and the rest of the staff. We adjust Dylan's routine carefully so he feels secure through the transition. And we love each other and love him and build something real. One day at a time, Marcus agreed. But Elena, I need you to know, I'm all in. Whatever challenges come, whatever complications arise, I'm committed to this. To us. I know, Elena said softly. I am too. They stood in the kitchen, holding each other as the house settled into comfortable silence around them. Outside, the city lights sparkled against the night sky. Upstairs, Dylan was safely asleep in his bed, dreaming of whatever 8-year-olds dream about. And here, in this moment, everything felt right in a way Marcus had never experienced before. He'd returned home early that day, months ago, expecting to find a simple employee-employer relationship. Instead, he'd discovered something infinitely more valuable, a partner, a co-parent, a love he hadn't known he was missing. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be medical emergencies and work challenges and parenting struggles. There would be days when Elena's diabetes was difficult to manage, days when Dylan struggled with his mother's absence, days when Marcus felt torn between career and family. But they would face it all together, the three of them, imperfect and real and choosing each other every single day. And really, Marcus thought as Elena tilted her face up for another kiss, what more could anyone ask for than that?